let's talk about the basement. Now, like the crawl space, we have moisture coming from several areas. Of course, we have a moisture coming through the wall. We have moisture coming up from the ground, okay, even though we have a barrier here of concrete as the floor. And then we have the moisture that accumulates due to humidity. Depending upon if you're in a conditioned or an unconditioned basement, that's going to vary. But let's just assume, for the sake of this video, that we're dealing with an unconditioned basement here. So we've got those three forms of moisture just like a crawl space. The advantage is with the basement, we have more air mass in here to deal with so that we can absorb more moisture, right? But we also, if you have periods where condensation is occurring due to hitting dew point, you've got more moisture release as a result of that as well, potentially. So let's talk about how we can begin to work on these spaces and implement moisture controls and increase engineering thresholds of these surfaces. Like your crawl space, we still have ultimately the subfloor to be concerned about. And I would refer over to the video that I did on crawl spaces in terms of how to manage moisture from the perspective of the subfloor. For the sake of this video, we're going to camp on the walls. The walls and the floors are two areas where moisture release is going on that we can correct in pretty short order. So let's start with EnviroSeal. We're going to, by the way, cover EnviroSeal and Masonry Guard in this, but we always start with EnviroSeal because EnviroSeal is the perfect base to Masonry Guard. EnviroSeal does some things very, very well. First, one of the problems that we have naturally with concrete, block, etc., is that as moisture wicks its way through the surface, it brings calcium with it, and that deposits on the other side, and we call that efflorescence. You see that white chalkiness that comes through the block wall or through the poured concrete foundation. That's called efflorescence. Efflorescence is basically calcium that's redepositing on the other side, but think of it as gradually over time that wall is becoming more porous because there's that leaching of solids to the other side of the foundation wall. And that's a problem because if the foundation wall is becoming more porous, it's becoming more brittle, it's becoming more weak over time, and we want to stop that. So EnviroSeal reacts permanently with the calcium that's within these walls here to stop efflorescence from forming, which gives it an insoluble matrix. Essentially, you could think of it as a lattice work or a gel structure that sets itself up in this wall and then redensifies this concrete structure so that you're strengthening that wall, stopping efflorescence. And by the way, it is the perfect primer for Masonry Guard. It actually increases the adhesion of Masonry Guard as it begins to restrict moisture flow and as it adds to all these other benefits that we've talked about with EnviroSeal. Now, once EnviroSeal has been applied to the surface and it's been given this opportunity to dry, now we can move into Masonry Guard. Masonry Guard performs the other task of block filling, sealing out moisture seepage, blocking stains, being a mold resistant product and moisture resistant at the same time, okay? So as far as block filling is concerned, you have all these little gaps and cracks and things like that are hairline that tend to form in all masonry. Once we have EnviroSealed the surface, we can come back with Masonry Guard and block fill as well. Once the moisture is restricted with EnviroSeal, now we have a way of also managing moisture from a seepage standpoint. Now, we're not a replacement for exterior waterproofing. Exterior waterproofing, especially in a basement space, is most likely needed if it hasn't already been applied to that foundation wall. However, if we've just got seepage issues or moisture accumulating to the surface outside of this, then we can use Masonry Guard very effectively to stop that seepage. Blocking stains is fantastic because of the opacity of the product. You're talking about a product that is over 70% solids and does a very effective job of giving you a bright white look on the inside of a basement. Add to that the moisture resistance, again from ASTM D5590 testing standards, and you're talking about a product that is proven mold resistant. And speaking of condensation and things of that nature, Masonry Guard is great so that if moisture does begin to accumulate in these areas, much like we talked about in the crawl space, humidity builds up over time. even if it's condensating on the interior of that, it's going to prevent that moisture from moving back into the surface that it is protecting and give you a high-performing, moisture and mold resistant product for the structure.